Hi, everyone, and welcome to the 57th episode of Slime Time Sidequest, an official Dragon's Den podcast. This is one of your hosts, Platty M3.
And this is one of your other hosts, Yangus the Legendary Bandit.
All right, everybody, it's time to set the scene for tonight's episode. So, the bombing of Pearl Harbor was less than a month ago, and while American isolationism was slowly coming to an end in Europe, planes were already lining up bombing runs on Japanese ships in the Pacific.
That's wrong year, Platty, wrong year.
What do you mean wrong year? Clearly, I'm just looking right here. It says 1942 on the list.
I'm sorry.
That's the game I'm talking about, not the year it came out.
Come on, Platty, read from the top, not the bottom.
Okay, Yangus, that's it. You're under arrest.
What'd I do?
Thought crime, mister. I know what you were thinking when you told me to read from the top. Besides, I'm the top dog around here. I'll read from any damn place on the page I want to.
Look, I know I tried to read what Pendy was going to say, but what the hell, Platty? Come on, man.
Oh, no. You can just stop with all this informal Platty business. Call me Big Brother. I've been watching you. That cam you think is off, it's not off. And you know what? I know what you're thinking, too. You're going to have to pry this horrible opening away from me out of my cold, dead microphone. Oh.
And that's enough of that Orwellian opening. We'll get back to Platty later, but first, this public service announcement.
Remember, boys and girls, don't go full totalitarian.
It's not good for your brain.
Likely a good recommendation, but you know what also isn't good for your brain?
Video games. They're from the devil.
Or so your parents might tell you if you were a kid in 1984.
You just wait another decade and they'll tell you that Pokemon's the devil. Anyway, now, I wouldn't know what that's like since I was born after the 80s, but yeah. Tonight we're going to do the first of 4 episodes of video games through the decades, and before we look ahead, we're going to go back 40 years into the past. The year is 1984, and some really memorable old games were just getting released. Some of them we played as kids at the arcade, some of them we've played as adults because they're memorable enough to have lasted the test of time. Some of us played them on more modern hardware as the years went on, such should be my case, some of these games. But anyway, here to talk 1984 video games tonight are our STEU STEU podcasting partners from All Trades DQ Media Abbey Partner Extravaganza Super Fun Time, Pendy Paul.
Hello from the stew.
That's us. I'm Paul, also known as EastX Twitch.
Well, with Big Brother on ice for a bit, let's get talking. I can start off with one of my memorable games. And so I will start with 1942. So 1942 is a Capcom game designed by Yoshiki Okamoto. It's a shoot 'em up, or shmup, as some people call them, where you pilot an American Lockheed P-38 Lightning twin-engine fighter plane over the Battle of Midway. This game was specifically designed to appeal to the Western market with its World War II theme. The arcade machine debuted in November of 1984, and it was a large commercial success. It was the first of the 19XX series, and 1942 went on to be on many home console systems as well. So I played this game in the arcades and on the NES. For me, the arcade version was fantastic. You take off from an aircraft carrier and you start out with 2 streams of bullets trying to shoot down all the different Japanese aircraft. You can also perform a flip to avoid danger on the screen. The weapon upgrades you get will increase the number of bullet streams you can fire all at once. You can go up to 4 streams of bullets and even get 2 bonus fighter planes that will stick right next to you on either side for a spread of up to 6. In this game, it's not about increasing your power so much, but increasing the spread of weapons you can fire at once. There is one gigantic boss plane you will encounter periodically. It's a long-range bomber, the Nakajima G10N. In the arcade, he will sit in the middle of the screen, flying around the center of the stage, where you can fly all the way around it. What is interesting is that if you have your little buddy fighters next to you when you get to this point in the game, they'll take off, leaving you to fend for yourself for some reason. And spoilers, you can beat the game, and if you do, you get a screen that says, "We give up! Special bonus," and it gives you your special bonus points. Game over. Presented by Capcom. P.S. Hope our next game. Yes, I said that right. P.S. Hope our next game. Yeah, I have no idea what that last line was about. Classic Japanese. Yeah, classic Japanese video game English right there. Now, the NES port was all right, but not quite as good as the arcade version. The graphics don't have as much detailed resolution. It plays a little bit slower, and instead of being able to fly around the boss plane, it just kind of sits in front of you and goes up and down. I also noticed a fun glitch that happens sometimes in battle. Remember how the little side fighters will take off during this boss battle? I noticed sometimes that they will take off, but their stream of bullets will still remain. All of the versions of the game also have a 2-player mode. If you try it, each player will take turns seeing who can outscore the other. If you beat the NES game, the English isn't quite as bad. You get a screen that says, "Congratulations" on it instead of "Congratulations." And if you like this game, try its sequel, 1943. More targets to shoot at, including ship battles. Music will play during the missions because in 1942, you just get a little jingle in the beginning and the end, and not during the battle and during the missions. And in 2-player mode, both players get to fight together simultaneously with their own fighter plane. It's a really fun series to play.
Yeah,
You can
that's
get
co-op.
Yes.
Yeah, you can even get it on your phone right now.
Oh, yeah. It's on many, many different systems. It's been on many, many different systems over the years. Very easy to find.
Yes, and it's in one of the Capcom arcade stadiums for consoles and Steam, too.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, this is about as classic as it comes for shmups.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just a very fun, simple, addictive game to play.
I think when we had an arcade for all of about a year and a half up the road, this is one I could get my kids to play easily.
Oh, it's a good quarter muncher, that's for sure.
Well, it was mainly the number one on the emulation machines because it was 1942. Because it's a number.
Yeah, that always happens too. I've always
Yep.
noticed that. Like when I've played,
Even better than
some
being
people's-
named AAA.
Exactly. I've played on some people's machines where they have a whole list of games, and yes, it's towards the top. So I was like, oh, I'll
Yep.
try this.
Oh yeah, I love this. I definitely put a bunch of quarters into this. They had it at one of our local pizza places that we eat as a kid. Because back then it was a big deal to go out and have a pizza. Go out, have a pizza, and sit there for an hour and a half.
Hell yeah, that was a classic place to have fun with
Yep.
some arcade games.
And
that
these
they'd always have
these
there.
would always have arcades. Yep, everyone would have an arcade with 3-4 games.
Mhm.
Usually Pac-Man or Miss Pac-Man. A lot of this, a lot of Centipede.
If you were at a
Yeah,
fancy
like a-
place, you'd get some of those Neo Geo machines that they'd put in later years.
Yeah, those are
Oh.
nice.
No, but like this and Galaga were my favorite. I don't know if Galaga would that be considered a shmup?
Yeah, it is. Just a very
Yeah.
early one.
Yep. So yeah. All right. Good game to start us off, Pendy. Paul, why don't we go to you next? Because I know you got a list.
That's true, so we can alternate to me easily.
Mhm.
I'll start by talking about Pac-Land. So Pac-Land came from Namco, now Bandai Namco. Yeah. And anyway, the arcade version of Pac-Land came out in 1984. It was ported to the Famicom in Japan the next year. We didn't get it on the actual NES in America. It came to European computers, the TurboGrafx and PC Engine in around 1990. And that's the version that a lot of American people would have played at home since we didn't get the NES game. And the Atari Lynx in 1992, kind of a cool game to end up on the Lynx. And Pac-Land is included in numerous compilations, most recently Pac-Man Museum Plus in 2022, which you can get on all the major platforms. Anyway, Pac-Land, it's a Pac-Man game, but it's not like most of them. It's not a maze game. It's a platformer. Not just a platformer, but it uses buttons instead of a joystick because the platforming genre was still kind of formulating around this time.
Mhm.
And yeah, you use left and right button instead of a joystick that can move left and right. And then, of course, there's a jump button. And if you were to tap either direction rapidly, that'll cause you to run instead of just walk. So the real arcade game, it feels a little different than your average regular platformer. And one of the mechanics I'd like to talk about is that there are springboards at certain points in the game. Like you'll have a big body of water and you need to use a springboard to jump and kind of like float over the water. And this mechanic always bugged me because it's really unintuitive. Basically, you jump on the springboard and then you have to alternate left and right rapidly in order to float over the water. Like if you don't do that, you simply cannot get over the water. And why would you think to alternate left and right to cross a gap, because you're actually only going in one direction. So that's unintuitive enough. But on the modern home versions, they always use the D-pad for movement or the analog stick. And then it's like alternating left and right on a D-pad rapidly like it wants you to. That's actually not that easy compared to jamming on the buttons. So I never liked that about the game, but it's just one little minor hiccup. And it's one reason that playing on real arcade hardware is better. Or Arcade 1-Up, because it's in some of the Arcade 1-Up cabinets. But what is Pac-Land? Well, it's based on the Hanna-Barbera cartoon. There was a Pac-Man Hanna-Barbera cartoon, which I loved as a kid. And I think a lot of Pac-Man fans did. So this is the only game that was actually based on it. And the cartoon theme song plays throughout the game. Like, it gets a little old to hear it constantly repeating, but it's a good song. So they do a good version, making that a chip tune. Anyway, talking about the sprites a little bit, they differ between the US and Japanese versions of the game. Like, in the Japanese version, they're more on model with like Japanese Pac-Man artwork, but the US version has sprites that more closely resemble the American cartoon. So they're slightly different. And if you get a collection, you're only getting the Japanese sprites. You don't get to see the American original. You'd have to use emulation or play on a real cabinet. And what else? Oh, yeah. Speaking of the sprites changing, there's some other sprite changing they've done with Pac-Land, because famously Bandai Namco has had like some ownership disputes over the character of Miss Pac-Man because At Games ended up with the rights to Miss Pac-Man. So it's complicated the appearance of Miss Pac-Man in different modern games and things like that. So in the version of Pac-Land that is on that's on Pac-Man Museum Plus and the Arcade Archives version of the game that you could get on Switch or PlayStation, Miss Pac-Man has been replaced with a different sprite, and she's called Pac-Mom, and Baby Pac-Man has been replaced with Pac-Sis. So this is it's this weird like semi-censorship. It doesn't mess the game up or anything because they're barely in the game at all. It's just you pass them by at certain points, but just a little weird thing. Like, it's harder and harder to play with this game looking just like it looked in the arcades back in the day.
Paxis, what are you doing?
Yeah, and what a weird name, Paxis. Yeah. But this Pac-Land was hugely influential in Japan. Like it's semi-forgotten if you're not a Pac-Man fan today. But again, in 1984, there were very few platformers, period. And this was a big arcade platformer. And it was apparently a big influence on Super Mario Brothers, which came along in 1985. So it's worth remembering, and I enjoy it.
Nice. I never watched the cartoon. So what's the theme song? Is it I'm Pac-Man, yum, 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 yum?
There's no lyrics, but if you want to hear what the theme song is like, just play around at Pac-Land, because like I said, it plays the whole time, so you'll recognize it after that. And it's a good show, by the way, still.
Did he have a really big nose in the Hanna-Barbera cartoon?
I don't think his nose was as big.
And what's funny is I'm looking here, like, how would I drop in our group chat? Like the original one, he's got a huge nose. It's almost like as long as his body is wide. Okay. And then I look at like the Lynx one for the Atari Lynx, and it's just like this tiny little stub. Then there's like Commodore 64, and it's like, I guess that's a screenshot from the Commodore, and he's got a huge nose again. And then I look at like arcade classic cabinets, and then he's got a tiny nose. It is so different between different versions.
Yeah, and Yangus pointed out that there is a Pac-Land stage in one of the Smash Brothers games, which is pretty cool too.
Okay. Yeah, it's featured in Smash Wii U, and they brought it back for Smash Ultimate, which was really weird because people really don't like the Pac-Land stage at all because it's an auto-scroller one, and really it's just it's kind of clashing because people are like, why don't they have the Pac Maze too? That seems a little weird because they had a perfect representation of that stage in Smash for 3DS, so it's a little weird that they didn't just bring that one back too, but. With what you're talking, I guess they consider it influential enough. It's like, that gets top billing instead. But
yeah, like here in the United States, we'll talk about it later. But Pitfall and Pitfall II were the big platforming influence before Super Mario Brothers. But over in Japan, Pac-Land was the big influence.
I got a little Super Mario Brothers. Maybe I'll do my out of order. But Yangus, why don't we? Unless Paul, you good with Pac-Land?
That was it, baby.
That's it. All right, then. On to Yangus. What do you want to talk about first there, Yangus?
All right, well, since I'm full of hot air anyway, I might as well put that to good use and blow up some balloons because we're going to talk about Balloon Fight first. Woo! So this is an arcade-styled game released kind of the early days of the NES, and I believe it also had an arcade release too, maybe. I didn't really do a whole lot of deep diving into that, but anyway.
Yes, it did.
Okay,
all right. Well, you can buy the arcade version on Switch, by the way.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
So yeah, we got there's an arcade version as well, but I'm going to mainly talk about the NES version. But yeah, it was one of the early titles from Nintendo for the system. Very basic kind of arcade style game. Features both single player modes and 2-player mode. The object of the game is to clear each level by taking out the enemy balloon bird flyers. You defeat all of them in a stage. Avoid getting your balloons popped. which would cause you to end up losing a life if both your balloons get popped. Beat the birds, you move on to the next level, so on and so forth. Enemies also include these little electric sparks that bounce around on the screen every now and then, usually depending on how long it takes to complete a stage, more and more will start popping up. And then there's the dreaded giant fish that gobbles up anything, player or enemy, that happens to reach the water at the bottom of the screen. I've seen that where if an enemy got too low, the fish just jumps out and gobbles them, and I was honestly surprised by that because I figured it'd be like, oh, okay, it's just a player hazard, but oh no, it affects the enemies too. So that was kind of a surprise when playing it once. But anyway, bonus levels in the game happen usually about after every two or three stages, depending. And the bonus stages include popping multiple balloons that come flying out of pipes from the background. You pop enough, you get some extra points. And sometimes, if you get all 20 popped, you might earn yourself an extra life. Good old-fashioned arcade-style gameplay. Another mode that's in this game, if you decide you don't want to play just the regular balloon fight mode, is there's balloon trip mode, where you try and get in my notes I put as fat as possible, avoiding obstacles, but it should be as far as possible. I just imagine now you're just picking up food as you're trying to stay in the air.
Damn, I had the get as fat as possible part down. I was good. What's real life?
But no, you're trying to get as far as possible and seeing, if you can make it, try and beat your scores. I like how I bet it before, though. That's pretty funny. But anyway, pretty straightforward game. Definitely one that's been very influential on Nintendo as a whole, because it always makes appearances in other games. Like I don't have it listed in my notes here, but if you play the WarioWare games, sometimes Balloon Fight or one of the modes, or even the characters from it, might pop up in one of the 9-volt stages of that game, or just as like a little fun extra. The one that stands out to me the most is from WarioWare Smooth Moves on the Nintendo Wii, where you actually have a micro game in that one where you actually have to flap your arms, because there's a 3D model of the balloon flyer guy as you're trying to avoid the fish and avoid the electricity and stuff. It's super silly, but it's this is probably what he would be doing in real life. But anyway, so some fun facts about the game. This was one of the first titles that former Nintendo president Satoru Iwata worked on, and apparently it remained one of his favorites throughout his life. Back when he passed away in 2015, some people who did art to remember him by would usually include the little balloon fighter guy in the picture, or they would have him floating away on some balloons to show he's going up to going up there, up to the heavens. So it's kind of a nice little tribute for that, and it was one that obviously made enough of an impact for him, because I believe there was also footage of him showing an NES something or other they were doing, and that was one of the themes that he personally picked out to include on that, so that was kind of cool. But anyway, other than that though, the game and its characters / its main theme have also appeared in various Smash Brothers titles. For instance, the theme song was a secret second track on the Icicle Mountain stage in Melee, and in Brawl, the giant fish actually appeared as an obstacle in the brand new Ice Climber stage that they brought in for that game. And because as the stage went on, eventually the mountaintop would slide off into the ocean, and if you got too close to the water, the fish would jump out and try and grab you, and if he caught you, then it was instant KO then. And I gotta say, they did a good job making that fish. The sprite for him is kind of weird looking, but man, that 3D model of that fish was pretty scary. I'm not gonna lie. It looks like a very it almost makes you think of if you took a Magikarp and made it as nightmarishly as possible. How it turned out is great. But yeah, that's about all I really have to say for Balloon Fight. It's one of the classics. You can play it on quite a few different Nintendo systems. Nowadays, if you have a Nintendo Switch and you have just the basic online plan, it's one of the games that's included with the NES app. It has tons of different games on it. And it's one that I personally have a lot of fun replaying every now and then. I'm not admittedly super big on the NES library, but this is one that I enjoy popping in every now and then and playing every now and then. Also, there's a Dragon Quest theme in the background, so...
You learned about Yangus. Good job, man.
Yeah, I did it. I talked about it. Yay!
You did it.
I did it.
A game from 10 years before you were born or something.
But yeah, that's all I really have to say about Balloon Fight. You guys have anything you want to add on to that?
So I've played around with this. I played around with this a little bit, doing one player, but looking at the 2-player mode, it looks a lot of fun being able to beat all the levels together. I can't tell if you would be able to pop each other's balloon accidentally or on purpose. I'm wondering if that's a thing when you do 2-player mode, but it looks a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know when you play as a human player, you have to watch out for the birds because their beaks will, pop your balloons on you. But I don't know. I don't know if that works for 2-player mode. I don't know if they have friendly fire on or not.
Yeah, it is a lot of fun to play though. I haven't played a lot of it, but kind of floating around and trying to pop all the balloons for the birds is fun. And I couldn't remember the fish, so I looked that up just now. Yeah, that is pretty ghoulish looking. I can understand why that gives anyone nightmares.
It's so evil looking.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
All right, talking about evil looking. Oh my goodness. So first game I'll talk about, I'm going to flip-flop from what I got in our document here. I'm going to talk about Boulder Dash.
Oh, that's a bunch of poppycock.
Because Boulder Dash...
Shenanigans.
No, yours was the poppycock one. Poppy balloon, poppycock. Boulder Dash was a 1984 Commodore 64 game, and holy crap, was it ugly as hell. I mean, I look at the Pac-Man game, and I'm like, wow, look at how bright and fun that is, and gosh, I don't know if the picture here is from an updated version of the balloon one, but even that's got some lovely black background with a really bright orange and yellow and teal balloons on it and everything. That looks really pretty. Well, Boulder Dash back in 1984 Commodore 64 was like all shades of brown and orange, and that's about it. Gray, I guess, too. I never played very much. I think a friend had this one. I never played very much. I remember the NES version a lot more, even though that would be quite a bit of years after this one. But the premise of Boulder Dash is the same thing. You're some dude underground. It's a puzzle game. There are different levels to puzzles. And in each puzzle, you are amidst all this dirt. There's a bunch of boulders around you and shining gems. Your goal is to get a certain number of gems to beat the level. However many, when you reach the set number of gems, a glowing spot will appear somewhere in the map, and you get to the glowing spot and you win. The problem is there's all these boulders in the way. And you can dig out from under the boulders as long as there's at least one piece of ground, because it's very grid-based. If there's one piece of ground under the boulder, then it'll stay in place. If you go take that, because every time you move, your person gets rid of the dirt. If you move under a boulder, magically your little guy is more than strong enough to hold that boulder. But when you move out of the way, the boulder then drops. It's physics-based. Everything's falling down. And that's the key. A lot of times you need to dig out a lot under there, get the boulder to go down, so you can then get past that. You can push boulders only one at a time. And if boulders drop, I want to say it's more than one. I was playing around a bit today to try to remind myself. But if the boulder drops too far, like if you dig out, I don't know, 5 or 6 spots under it and then take the one spot out that's holding the boulder and then try to run away. And if it drops far enough, it'll hit and squish you. Like I said, if you're right next to the boulder, apparently you can still hold it. But if it's got to drop, it's going to hit you. Or if multiple boulders drop, they get you too. It's pretty simple, but the mazes get complex. I kept getting stuck on level 2 today on the NES version because I kept blocking myself into a room. It's like, each puzzle stage, you got to scroll up, down, left, right, because it's bigger than the screen. But the second stage was like divided into rooms that were maybe, I don't know, like 6 by 10 grid. And I kept, as I went into one room, I kept passing by, and I did it 3 times in a row. I'm like, what am I going to learn? I'd hit the boulder would fall, and I could push the boulder, but another boulder had fallen at the other on the other side of the entrance to the room. And, being an old game, there was no like, oh, hey, you're trapped here. So I just had to sit and like wait for the timer, because there's a timer going on every level. I just had to wait for the timer to run out. So I died so I could replay that level. But by the time I said there's a Mario connection here, by the time they got to the NES, the Commodore was just like level after level after level. But on the NES, it almost looks like a Mario Brothers 3 overworld, like even with the little hills. And you're a little guy going dot to dot, and it's like, oh, hey, look, you're at World 1-1. You're at World 1-2. So I was playing on the NES, and I'm like, maybe that's why I remember this as a kid so much. It reminded me of Mario 3. At least the overworld, the gameplay is obviously nothing like that. As you get farther in the game, there are some little enemies. There are little fireflies. Even on some of the early stages, but they're kind of like locked in an area, like, okay, just don't dig the dirt out from around them and they won't go out and bug you. As you get much farther in the game, there'll be like this moss that grows through the tunnels, kind of blocking your way. So you better make sure you get the number of gems you need out of an area before and get out of that area fast. you can play this game online. I'm going to put a link to it in our show notes. I clicked on it, and there's a whole Boulder Dash franchise website, and it's like, hey, play our first game online, and it's right there built in their homepage. You can play it, but I mean, this came out in 84. By 86, they already had Boulder Dash 3. They had 2 and 3 out on the Apple IIs and Commodore 64. 4 or Boulder Dash Construction, and then it just keeps going on that. Super Boulder Dash, and I guess there's 80 levels in the original, all collected in different volumes. And heck, there's 2 different ones for the Switch right now. There's the 30th anniversary collection, and there's another that's also on like iOS and Android, and they got a newer one as well. So it's a series that's like 40 years old here. It just keeps going. Keep dashing away from boulders, and you're good. But I found it funny. I didn't realize, because I never played around with the Wii very much, but this even came to the Wii Virtual Console back in 2009. I found a review on IGN, and they still liked it, but they were like, why did we not get the NES version? We got the old Commodore 64 version on the Wii Virtual Console. So another one of those games that's been around forever, and yet they keep pumping out new ones. Any of you guys ever play a Boulder Dash?
I've always been aware of it, but I've never actually played one.
I mean, you're not missing a whole lot.
It makes me think of Spelunky. No, not Spelunky, Spelunker. It makes me think of that, although they're actually not very similar.
No, it got me thinking of Dig Dug. As a matter of fact, it was Dig Dug that I was thinking of at first, and then I was like, no. I know Dig Dug. That's not this. And when I pulled this up, the screenshots, I'm like, oh, yeah, my friend Dave had this. I remember playing this at his house. And then the NES, I was like, oh, yeah, I remember that one, definitely. So, alrighty. Well, Paul, we started with Pendy. Pendy, we're going to circle back around to you.
Okay, so my final game is Duck Hunt. And Duck Hunt is a light gun shooter that debuted in Japan in 1984 on the Famicom and in America in arcades. So it was fun to learn that this debuted in America in arcades initially, because personally, I never got to play this version of it growing up. In fact, it appears the arcade version only got officially released in America and later in Europe, but never in Japan. In North America, it was a launch title for the NES, and later it would become part of an NES bundle you could buy. I was fortunate enough to have this bundle that had Duck Hunt and Super Mario Bros. On the same game cart, and of course, the famous NES Zapper light gun. I don't know. Oh, yeah. I don't know about everyone else, but I loved the clicking sound that it would make when you pulled the trigger. It was great.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. You just saying that, I can hear it.
Oh, yeah.
My fingers twitching.
So satisfying. I ended up not getting a lot of games that use the Zapper. In fact, the only other game that I had used it for was for Operation Wulf. But man, that was so much fun. But that's a game for a future side quest. In Duck Hunt, you have 3 modes to choose from. Mode A has 1 duck flying around at a time. Mode B has 2 ducks at a time. And Mode C, where you shoot flying clay targets. You have to shoot a minimum number of targets to advance to the next stage, and the stages increase in difficulty with faster targets and bigger minimums to conquer. If you are on a stage and you miss your target or targets, both targets, the infamous dog will pop up and laugh at you. I found out 2 fun facts about this game that I didn't know before researching this game. If you are playing Mode A with 1 duck at a time, another person can use the NES controller to move the duck around. I had no idea that was a thing. And if you play the arcade version, there's a bonus round, and unlike with the regular rounds, when you shoot the ducks, all the feathers will blow away, and the dog is leaping around the screen as a distraction. You can actually shoot the dog if you aren't careful. Or on purpose, if that's, the way you want to be. If you do shoot the dog, he will come out afterwards on crutches, scolding you for your bad aim. I read they took this out of the NES version to make it more family friendly. Though if you look at the animations for it, it's all very Warner Brothers cartoon level of comical violence. Nothing really graphic. So as much as you might want to shoot the smartass for laughing at you in the NES version, you can't. But there are some mods that fix that if you want to look into it. Did I try? Yeah, I know. I looked into them. Some of them are just hilarious. Did I try to play this game fairly? Sure, some of the time. Was I around 6 to 8 years old where I would just bring the gun right up to the screen and shoot the targets? You bet I did.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But for its time, it was a fun game to play.
Makes me think about, I think I've mentioned this on a podcast before. There was a arcade game called Ameridarts that I loved. And I don't know, it was just a dart playing game. And at one point, I realized if you miss the actual board on there, your dart falls to the floor and a little rat comes out and grabs it. And it just became a quarter sucker for me to aim at the rat from then on. Like, okay, miss on purpose, aim for the rat.
Nice.
And you could. They built that in. I was like, oh, it's one of the first video games, something like that. So, darn it, wish I could have shot the dog.
Yeah, you can go to town on the dog in a bonus round in the arcade version. Yeah, when you blow him away, like his face gets like all exploded and black.
Oh, damn!
Like I said, Warner Brothers type comical violence. So it's fun.
Nice. Oh, yeah, I think I obviously when I had my NES, we had it. We had the package. I don't think I knew anybody growing up that didn't have this.
Yeah, that was super popular.
Yeah.
I think that helped put the NES on the map was being able to buy that kind of bundle.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
Yeah, it helped that they advertised it as a toy too instead of a video game product. So people are like, "Oh, it's a toy." Okay.
Okay, we can justify that. All right. That's the end of Duck Hunt. That brings us to Paul again. What else you got for us, Paul?
Well, I thought we would talk about Karateka, which some people also known as Karateka. So this game was created by Jordan Mechner, who also created the Prince of Persia series. So he's a pretty famous Western designer. And the player controls a karate master, which in Japanese can be referred to as a karateka, So that's why that's the real way to say it. But anyway, he has to rescue a princess from a Japanese fortress. And the fights in this game, like you move through levels of a sort, but the fights are all one-on-one fights like in a fighting game. So it's just you versus one opponent at a time. And you'll end up fighting, you fight with karate, but you end up fighting against different human villains sent by the main bad guy and also the villain's hawk, which is a lot more, I don't know, like unpredictable or at least difficult to fight.
Yes, very much so.
And you've got punches and kicks, if I remember correctly. And, you can jump kick and crouch and all that. You can die from falling in holes. So that's something you shouldn't do, although there is an achievement for that in the most recent version. Right at the start of the game, you can just run off the cliff where you start, which is funny. And you'll eventually fight the final boss and rescue the princess. But if you approach her in the wrong way, like if you approach her using a fighting stance, then she actually attacks you and that'll kill you. So you get like sort of a bad ending if that happens, at least in the original game, because apparently that isn't in some of the newer versions. Anyway, this game has, like Prince of Persia, it has highly realistic animation. I think he rotoscoped, which is where you draw over footage of people or photographs. So, it still looks good. And it also reminds me of Out of This World or Another World, that adventure game. The movement looks kind of like that due to having so many frames of animation and not a lot of color in the actual characters. And it also has cinematics, which were not a common thing back then. You'll see the villains, like the main bad guy, sending his troops after you. And you'll also see scenes with the princess that you have to rescue. So that gives it, they are cinematics, right? It makes it feel more cinematic, like you're watching a movie or something. And Karateka started as an Apple II computer game first, then it was ported to Atari 7800 computers. In Japan, it came out on the Famicom. Once again, I don't think we got an actual American NES version, which is lame, but it still came to plenty of computer systems. Then in 2012, there was an enhanced remake on Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, which had, of course, much better graphics, and it added multiple playable characters. So that helped people remember the game again. And then just recently, in last year, 2023, Digital Eclipse released a game called The Making of Karateka, which is, you might think that's just a documentary, but no, they've got like a series they're doing, which also has Atari 50 in it and Llamasoft, where it's got documentary stuff about Karateka, so you can learn all about the development and also about Jordan Mechner, so that's fun. You can look at photos and watch interviews and things like that. But then it's also a collection of Jordan Mechner's games. Like you get several versions of Karateka and also some other games he's made. And that is on all the modern systems and Steam. So if you're interested in Karateka or just like classic, I think, American games, unless he's European, I forget. But anyway, if you're interested in that kind of stuff, then it's a really cool compilation to have. Oh, yeah. And by the way, I actually study karate. I'm not that far along, but I do take karate. And that was kind of inspired by the Karate Kid and Cobra Kai. But, nice. I love karate things. So I love that about this game.
Yeah, I remember playing this on my Commodore 64, and I didn't remember the name until 2 hours ago, you put some screenshots in our planning document. I'm like, oh my God, that game. I would sit. This is one of the. Gosh, I probably didn't have more than a handful, 5-6 games on my own Commodore 64. A lot of times, just like I said earlier, I remember playing at my friend Dave's house on his because he always had lots more games, and he got the Commodore. Was it the 128? Did they have 128 right after 64?
Yes.
He had whatever he had the next generation of Commodore too, and so he'd have like both, and I could be playing on his one, and he could be playing. But no, I had this, and yeah, what is that? I think you could punch up, middle, down, and then kick up, middle, down, and the jump, and just those commands were enough to just keep going. I watched a long play, or fast forwarded through a long play of it while eating dinner tonight, and I was like, oh yeah, I never got to this end. I was never this good, but no, I remember, and like you said, that hawk, man, timing stuff on this game was very interesting, but no, good game, good pull. Like, wow, I think I need to like find this on an emulator or something and give it a go, or check out the digital Eclipse thing. I hear about digital Eclipse stuff all the time from the A4 Play podcast. They're good friends with the people who put these together, and they're always talking about the newest one and what bizarre marketing plan they have for it. There was one this summer that they like randomly got he's a wrestler or a Major League Baseball player to endorse, and it was just like, what? That has absolutely nothing to do with that, but they just yanked someone from the 80s or 90s that was and got them to make a commercial for it.
Oh, fun. Yeah, I'm becoming a fan of Digital Eclipse because they've done a lot of good retro compilations lately. Not like I said, this one, Atari 50 and the Lamasoft collection are all really good. They did the Ninja Turtles Cowabunga collection, and there's probably some others that I'm not thinking of, but they have like everything you would want in these particular collections, except maybe like no online multiplayer, but not usually.
Yeah, but I mean, they've got design documents, and they're interviewing people. It's like a documentary and a game at the same time, right?
Yeah, so you get a lot like value out of it. You can play or you can watch.
Yep. And I know the game you just talked about, Karateka, it said there's like unreleased levels and just stuff that got left on the cutting room floor, thrown back in for fun.
Heck yeah. And yeah, I mean, like, I own it, but I haven't spent that much time with it. I played it for like an hour, but like, yeah, there's a lot more I could learn about it if I was to spend the time with it.
If we only had more time for games, but
that'd be nice.
Exactly. We got more time to talk about games, though. Yangus, circling back to you, what 1984 game do you want to discuss next?
Well, speaking of circles, you need those to get around in this game. Specifically, you need tires, which happen to be circle-shaped, and you're going to need them on your bike. And it's very exciting, because we're going to talk about Excitebike.
Woo!
Man, that's a great segue, they said. But yes, next game that I'm going to talk about is what? I'm sorry.
No, sorry. Just making more circle jokes.
Well, we'll make a round trip back to that joke, Platty. Don't worry.
Yeah, dude. Don't be a circle jerk.
Oh, there we go. Now it's ruined.
All right. But yeah, so next game I'm going to talk about is Excitebike. This was an early racing title by Nintendo. Players compete against other bikers on the racetrack, or they can attempt for the best times on courses, depending on what game mode you want to pick. Pretty straightforward. You play as a nameless racer who is trying to get to the end of the course. There's a bunch of other racers running around on said courses. You avoid them, take jumps to, do cool stunts, hit little speed boosts, avoid mud puddles that slow you down, all sorts of stuff to, for an early racing game to kind of, I guess it'd be a racing game of sorts. I don't know really what the actual kind of race, what kind of game this would be, but I've always kind of considered it that. But anyway, pretty straightforward game. Just get to the end of the goal, or get to the goal at the end. Try and be the winner of the Excitebike rally and everything. But one of the big draws for this game, though, was that there was actually a customization mode. So players can create custom courses via the track editor, which was a pretty big feature for a game back in the 80s. Players could drive their own tracks to test them out, give them a proper test run, and I believe in some later releases of the game, specifically like on the Nintendo 3DS, you could actually save your creations and then share them with other players online, or if you did the Street Pass feature. So that was kind of cool. Like Balloon Fight, Excitebike has also made appearances in other Nintendo titles. One that a lot of people nowadays might recognize is the inclusion of the Excitebike Stadium in Mario Kart 8 and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. The course even changes layout each time it's raced on to reflect the track design editor of the original. The only time it won't change is when you do time trials, because they want to have a set course or a set layout for that, so you can try and get your best time. But otherwise, whenever you race this course, the track always has a little bit of a different layout every time. So kind of a nice little nod back to the original game. Also, there's some appearances like other stuff like in WarioWare or Smash Brothers. One that was kind of a funny little this is a goofy idea for an assist trophy in Smash Brothers Brawl was they actually had like 8 to 12 Excitebike racers would pop out if you used an assist trophy, and they just go racing around on the flat parts of a course. Sometimes they do a little jump or they crash into an opponent. They were more of a nuisance than an actual help, but it was pretty funny just hearing their little motors rubbing around on the stages you were playing on when all your fighters are trying to go after each other. Because they were all only about like up to like, let's say like Mario, like they'd only be up to like Mario's knees or something. Like they're all teeny tiny. It's super funny.
Mm-hmm.
Like they just pluck the sprites right out of the game and put them in there. But yeah, admittedly, I don't have a whole lot to say about Excitebike, but it is a fun game to kind of mess around with, and I've had fun using the track editor over the whenever I've picked up the game to kind of look at it. There is another version of this game, and that was, I believe, released only on the Famicom, called Excitebike Versus. I don't really know all what that version has. I'm going to assume it's more of like a two-player focus game instead. But yeah, this is another one that also had an arcade release. It's one that definitely, kind of like with Balloon Fight from this era, has left an impact on future Nintendo stuff, since they sometimes make little references to it every now and then, depending on what games you play and what you see. But yeah, this was a game that eventually led to some other NES racing games. I forget what the name of them is called, unfortunately, but there were some that were made by Rare, who was a big part of Nintendo at the time. But there's more of like an isometric 3D-esque kind of one. And then eventually, we got Mario Kart. But yeah, this was definitely an early influential kind of game for the racing genre. So,
that was
any of you guys played
Pro-Am.
Excitebike?
Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you.
No, you're good. I was finishing up anyway. I just was asking if anybody else has ever played Excitebike before.
Oh yeah, this was such a well-designed game. Like the physics and the control for controlling your bike is a lot of fun, easy to pick up and play. And I remember playing this and just fooling around with the track editor for hours, just building all sorts of tracks. It was such a fun feature for it. It reminded me of a PC game that I also had. I forget the name of it exactly, but it was a stunt man kind of game where you had a stunt car and you could build your own tracks and you could build different stunts, loop-de-loops, and whatever you wanted. And that, just that kind of feature where you can build your own track like that is always so much fun to play. I could just sit down and come up with all sorts of stuff. But yeah, it was a fun game to play back in the day, and I always had a tremendous amount of fun doing it.
Did the NES version actually save your custom track?
See, I don't 100% remember, to be honest. I don't think it did.
I don't think it had a battery pack in there.
That's a shame.
That's why, though, with later releases, there was a line of games that they did on the 3DS where it was like it was like 3D reimagined or 3D remix or something like that for certain NES games, and one of them was Excitebike, as I talked about. Well, that one actually did have it where you could have like several save slots. You can make your own courses and share them with people. So I think in some later releases they also included the ability to save. Like I think if I remember right, on the Wii Virtual Console release, they also had it like a little thing they added in so you could save your tracks. I could be wrong on that one, but either way, though, they did eventually start adding that into like some of the later releases, or re-releases of the game, excuse me.
That's good.
My brilliant NES designs lost to the sands of time.
Oh, yeah.
Never to be seen again.
What a shame. Yeah, it's probably one where in Japan there was a Famicom disc version, and typically with those you could save, so I imagine.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if that's what the Excitebike Versus had, was one of its features too. It's on the NES app on the Switch, but admittedly I haven't messed with that one that much. But yeah, that could be another thing too. Could have been that, since that's the disc thing instead of the cartridge one, that maybe they had like a backup save or something, or like a code that would come out and be like, hey, if you enter this code, this creates that course again for you.
The little animation where your guy falls off the bike and crashes is just adorable too.
Yeah. Yes, good.
I
Good
thought they always
fight
looked
work
like
for
they
this
were
game.
flapping their arms to get back to their bike too.
Yep, they're doing the balloon fight method. They're trying to fly back to their bike.
There's at least one sequel too, Excitebike 64, which I think is well regarded. Am I remembering
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it's pretty good. I've only played it a few times, but that one also has a track editor in it, and that one
Ooh.
does let you actually save your tracks.
Good.
But yeah, that one actually is also on the Switch's Nintendo 64 app thing if you got like the expansion pack thing, whatever. But then it was also released on the Wii U back in the day as well when they had the Virtual Console up for that. And I know a lot of people were pretty excited because it never came out on the Wii's Virtual Console, so people were like, "Oh, Nintendo actually remembered this one! Oh my gosh!" I had a cousin that owned this game, or owned the Nintendo 64 sequel game, and he enjoyed it a lot too. He'd bring it over to my grandparents' place, and we'd play that every now and then. I wasn't very good compared to him, but we had a good time messing around with it, and like the track editor stuff.
Well, that was always the best part of the track editor. Not so much when you were playing it by yourself, but when you had other people around and you could just, hey, fuck you, take this track.
Yeah,
just build the hardest track.
We definitely did that.
Yep. That's part of the track editor. Alrighty. Well, let's get back on track. I guess this brings it to me now. My second game. We'll see who can talk the shortest amount their game. I remember, I was thinking back to this one just because I had this visual of Mario in my head. But he's in this game all right. It's 1984's Pinball. Nothing else, just called Pinball. And, it's amazing that they got this thing to work as well as it did with one pinball board in the entire game. Not multiple. At the same time, Boulder Dash over there has got like 80 levels to it on the Commodore 64. But good old Pinball on the NES has one pinball machine. And Paul was like, "Oh, I saw you posted some images in the planning document." I was like, "Yes, because those are the only 3 images from the entire game." So it's pinball, but it takes place over 2 screens. You got top half of the pinball cabinet, bottom half of the pinball cabinet, and if you've got bumpers, flappers, whatever, on both ends. So if it goes down the middle up top, it does go down below, and you've got a very rare shot of actually bumping it back up top. But up top, just your normal bouncer. It's got a couple, there's a ramp up to the left that usually got like little Pac-Man like dots. If you get all 7 of them, there's a couple seals that are just images of seals in the middle of the board, and they'll have a little ball that they spin on their nose if you get that, but it really doesn't do much. After the top, if the ball goes down below, you've got 5 slots right away that looks like a poker hand. Every time you go through, you open up a poker hand. It's building up to a royal flush in spades. They got the ace on the right, the king, queen, jack, and 10. I gave this another half an hour today. Again, trying to refamiliarize myself, trying to see what happened. And no matter what I did, I could not get couldn't get the royal flush. Kind of towards the lower end where the flappers are, there's 3 eggs. As the ball passes over them, cracks the egg, a little chick pops out, and if you cross over the chick again, the chick disappears. So you're just killing them here. But if you can run over all 3 little chicks, you get a bonus bouncing thing. Like in most pinball machines, the way you lose is the ball goes down the middle, or there's those ramps on the far right and the far left that the ball can go down that you have no control over. But if you clear out the little baby chicks, you get little bouncers that appear in the leftmost and rightmost place. There is a place to get your ball. There's a little like black hole area on the top of the board. If you get it in there, it just shoots it out really fast. Aim back towards the middle. But if you can manage to get your ball in the little black hole on the bottom half of the board, you go to the completely bizarre Mario area. And you've got good old Pauline is walking around at the top of this bonus stage. And Mario's holding a little platform, and there's a pinball going up and down. And it's almost like Breakout, when the ball comes down and you're trying to bounce it back up and can destroy little rectangles above you. Speaking of old games. But if you break out Pauline, because she's kind of trapped in this upstairs area, she falls down. If you catch her, you get a bunch of points. If not, you go back to playing pinball at that point. So There was no music to this, just sound effects. I had a little jingle at the beginning. Nothing, nothing while you were playing. I know, Pendy, you said that about 1942 as well. No background music. It's just the shooty. So there was room for improvement here. Also, maybe make a second board. I couldn't imagine paying $60 back then for this. But that is the end of NES Pinball.
Back in the days when Mario had that Pauline as his first girlfriend before Princess Peach.
Well, I mean, she might have died in this game for the number of times. I was going to say, I dropped her, I think, 3 out of the 4 times I knocked her down today. I was like, gosh, why can't I get over there in time? What it was is the ball was coming down at a different angle, and I was so like, oh, gotta get the ball. Oh, also, the controls of this one was bizarre. Your entire D-pad moved the left flap, and A or B moved the right flap. So, probably these days, B would do the left, A would do the right, or something like that. But no, up, down, left, right, didn't matter which way you pushed. That was your left flipper. And B or A did the right flipper. It's kind of weird control scheme.
I'm looking at the picture that we have in our show notes of Pauline, and I was like, man, this kind of looks like olive oil from Popeye. And I totally forgot that Donkey Kong originally was going to be like Popeye and olive oil and all that. They switched them out. Now it makes sense.
Alrighty. I know, Paul, you've got a third game at least, right?
I've got 2 more, baby.
You got 2 more. Yangus, did you have one more too, or no?
Yeah, I had one more.
All right, we'll go Paul, Yangus, Paul. So, Paul, take it away. What else you got for us tonight?
Well, here's a game that's not one of my favorites, but it is pretty influential still, so we'll talk about it. And that is Irem's Kung Fu Master. I think it's by Irem. Could be Data East. I should have remembered. Anyway, Kung Fu Master was loosely based on a 1984 Jackie Chan movie called Wheels on Meals. Weird title. But in Japan, the movie was called Spartan X, and the game Kung Fu Master is called Spartan X in Japan. It takes some influence from a Bruce Lee movie too, but the main one, at least, is the Spartan X thing. In this game, the hero's girlfriend has been kidnapped, and to get her back, he has to go through 5 floors of a temple and beat the boss of each floor, which you'll probably never do because it's super hard. Yeah, and the main thing causing the difficulty are the controls. In this game, up jumps, and in the arcade version, jumping forward, which you would want to do so you could jump kick at people, it requires that you be walking before hitting up, so you can't do a standing forward jump. Really annoying. And they did improve on that in the NES version, so that's something. You can punch or kick, and you can crouch. And yeah, jump kicks are effective. The fighting the enemies, the regular enemies are one-hit kills usually, but then you have bosses who have more life, and they're quite tough. But the regular enemies stick to you, so if you don't kill an enemy before they touch you, they just stick to you, and your health just drains out, and you gotta rapidly hit buttons to get them off of you. But it's annoying because regular enemies are just too much of a threat, and they come from both sides, so you have to alternate your attacks with both sides as you're trying to progress left or right, and it's just tough. Then there's the NES version, which I said is slightly easier, and the NES version is just called Kung Fu instead of Kung Fu Master. I don't know why they changed it, but it's got not as good graphics. The arcade version has pretty nice graphics for the time. The NES version looks more like what you remember NES games looking like. But I had a friend who had that when I was a kid, so I'd play at his place sometimes. Now, talking about influence, the arcade version was directed by Takashi Nishiyama, and he went on to work on Street Fighter 1. Not Part 2, but Part 1. And by the way, Street Fighter 1 is not a good game, so maybe there's kind of
some game I don't think I've ever played, the original.
Yeah, and like I said, if you today go back and play Kung Fu Master, you probably won't like it either, right? So it kind of reminds me of that. But he didn't only make bad games. It was just, I don't know, part of his process or whatever. Because he did go on to work on Fatal Fury Part 1, which is really good, and King of Fighters 94 and some of the later King of Fighters. But King of Fighters 94, that's the first one, and he worked on it, and people love that game. So he really grew as a director, for sure. But the NES version was directed by Shigeru Miyamoto. I can't say his name right. Okay, was directed by
Shigeru Miyamoto.
Miyamoto, yes, that's what I was gonna say. Before he created Super Mario Brothers, so it was like one of one of the steps on the road to him making that super good game. Oh, and Kung Fu Master is considered an early beat 'em up. Like some people think of it as the first beat 'em up. With games like this, I don't know. It doesn't have that much in common with the main genre of beat 'em ups, but I guess it somewhat is a beat 'em up. It's not like you're jumping on platforms or anything. You're just restricted to one plane, and usually beat 'em ups aren't like that. But, oh yeah, another thing about this game is that it didn't get a direct sequel that I know of, but it did inspire, or it has a sequel with a different theme called Vigilante. And Vigilante was an arcade game and also came out on TurboGrafx and computers. And so some people remember Vigilante fondly because it looks nice, but it still plays pretty similarly to Kung Fu Master.
I played the NES version, Kung Fu, and my God, was I horrible at it. Hated that game. I sucked at it. It was just not my game.
Yeah, it's tough. I got to the second floor on the NES version today because the boss was much easier than the arcade one. Like the arcade one, I hit him several times, but he still killed me. But yeah, then the second floor is like you're fighting lots of snakes and things, and they're tough. So that was enough for me.
It is a very difficult game.
Alrighty. Have we mastered this?
No.
We never will.
Never will. But we will pass the baton to SonSon. Wow, there's a horrible transition. Yangus, why don't you take it away with your final 1984 game?
Well, it does work because he uses a power pole sort of thing, going off of what they call it in Dragon Ball anyway. This is based on that. But yes. Actually got another game I'd like to talk about too, but both of these are going to be pretty quick, I'll be honest. So, but
Speed round.
First one is going to be SonSon or SonSon, however you want to say it. It was released. It was an arcade side-scroller game created by Capcom. Players must reach the end of each, quote, stage, end quote, by defeating/avoiding enemies. Along the way, you collect items for points and hope you can make it to the end to beat the game. If you do end up beating the game, it's pretty simple where it's like, congrats, you beat it, and then you just start the game over. That's all it is. It's easier said than done, though, because this is a very much an old school arcade game difficulty-wise, because you get one hit and you're dead, and enemies come in from all sides. They can move really quick, change patterns and stuff. I was able to beat the game, but I had to use the rewind feature several times when playing it on one of the arcade Capcom Stadium things that they have.
Good job beating it.
Yeah, it wasn't really worth it. I just did it just because I wanted to see what would happen.
And you were told, congrats, play again.
Yes, basically. But I do like the animations of the game, and it very much kind of this era of Capcom arcade stuff too. I have a kind of a soft spot for it because it's very silly. It's very simple with the presentation, where it's usually just a black background with like colored bits in front of it. But usually it's a good time, and even though it was like frustrating at points, it was a fun little game to just do a run through of. But one of the things that I want to talk about real fast is that this is very much one of the legacy titles from Capcom as a whole, because in a later game, at the end of the Marvel vs. Capcom series at the time, in Marvel vs. Capcom 2, SonSon makes an appearance via his granddaughter, also named SonSon. I like to call him SonSon for the grandpa and SonSon for the girl, or vice versa, whatever. But anyway, the original SonSon does make an appearance in his granddaughter's fight opening animation as he flies her in on his magic cloud, now appearing as an old man. But
that's so cool.
Yeah. It was one of those things where I wondered who that was, and it's like, it's supposed to be the original SonSon flying her in.
Oh, I had no idea. I never looked that up, and I like that. I like playing that character in Marvel vs. Capcom 2 as well. It's a very fun character to play, and transforming into the giant gorilla and doing all sorts of moves with the pole. She's got some goofy animations that she does, like when she captures people in her little jug and whatnot. It's a fun character.
Yeah, and one of her super animations where she turns the enemy into a giant piece of fruit. I believe that all the fruit from that super are based on the actual fruit items you can pick up in the game as well. So
that's awesome.
Nice little shout outs in there.
Yeah, nice.
But yeah, I don't really have a whole lot else to say about this one. It's definitely one of Capcom's big influential arcade games, and I believe, if I remember right, it was one of the games that was also featured in a Capcom versus, or what do they call it? Not versus. It was Capcom Cross Tezuka, who's one of the first manga creators, one of the most influential ones in Japan for Astro Boy and stuff like that. Because he also had his own take on the story of Journey to the West, which is what SonSon is based on. Mm-hmm. And they had the SonSon from the Capcom game meeting up with the SonSon from Tezuka's story about that. So that was cool. There's a
Cool.
little piece of art where the two of them are in their own designs looking at each other and just like, oh, hey, look at you. You look like me. But yeah, that's all I got to say about that one. It's you'll either go bananas for it or you'll ape out. I don't know.
I got a couple of things to add.
Go ahead.
First, I think the arcade game is 2-player co-op, isn't it?
Yeah, I believe so, yeah.
So that's a good thing. But also there is a SonSon 2, which came out on PC Engine in Japan, the Japanese TurboGrafx. And that one is more of a regular platformer.
Oh.
Interesting.
So a bit of SonSon continuity throughout the years.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't even know there was a sequel game. That's cool.
Yeah, I actually had it back in the day in my collection.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Alrighty, Paul, you want to talk about your final game, and then we'll get Yangus to talk his surprise final game.
Oh, yeah. Let's do that then. Okay, well, I started out talking about an early platformer, so let's talk about another one. This one is Pitfall II. It is the sequel to Pitfall, which came out in 1982 on Atari 2600. And the original Pitfall invented the platformer genre. You know, it's the first real platformer, I believe. So Pitfall 2 also came out as an Atari 2600 cartridge. And it actually had a special chip inside to be able to have better graphics and music, which is something that happened with a lot of NES and Super NES games going forward as well, you know? So I like that when they could put something in the game itself to overcome hardware limitations. But anyway, it does look nicer. Like when you look at it, it has the same art style, but there is still more visual detail. Like there's a nice looking sky, for instance, you know, with some shades of color. Anyway, Pitfall 2 takes place in Peru, and the main character, Pitfall Harry, has to rescue his niece, a cat, and find a diamond. So those are the objectives of the game. There are no lives or time limit in Pitfall 2, unlike the first game, so they've changed up the way it works a little bit. Instead, you lose points from dying, and you get sent back to a checkpoint. Checkpoints in this game are designated by red crosses on the ground, so when you get to one, you know, hey, this is where I'm going to restart when I die. And when you die, you actually get sent, like, your character scrolls back to that point. You know, it's like it zooms back over there, sort of like a rewind feature. So as far as I know, this is the first game to have checkpoints, but even if it isn't the very first one, it's definitely a very early one, but I think it's the first. Anyway, platformer, it's got players have to explore 256 total screens to find the 3 target items and beat the game. So sort of, you know, you enter a screen and you have to survive whatever obstacles there are, like a scorpion or a bird or a bat flying by. You know, you've got to somehow navigate around them. There's other things like pits and such, and then get to the other side of the screen, and then you go to a new screen. So, and games like Zelda operate that way too, the original Legend of Zelda. But 256, that's massive, you know, so this would be a difficult game to just beat on your own. Like if you're a kid and this was one of your only games, you probably could get there. But like me as a modern grown-up gamer, I would much rather use maps. And of course you can find maps online, but other things besides just platforming, you can climb ladders. You know, there's like just on the screen, you'll see multiple levels. Like you start out above ground, but you can see the below ground section, and then falling in a hole will take you below ground. And there's also swimming, which is new for Pitfall 2. And not just swimming left and right, but you can dive down in the water, and there's, you know, eels or something, some kind of threats in the water. Talking a little more about the history, it was ported from Atari 2600 to other home computers of the time, and Sega even made an arcade version with enhanced graphics. So if you look at the arcade version, it actually looks really nice. But when they would port games back then, you know, they had to usually rewrite them. You couldn't just like use Unity and automatically get the same game on multiple platforms. So when they did that, they would often make changes and improvements. You know, like whoever was porting it would personalize it to some extent. And that's what the guy did for the Atari 800 and Atari 5200 versions, and 5200's console. But anyway, he added a whole second map of equal size to the game. So like these two particular versions, they're twice the game that the others were. But Activision, which is, you know, Activision first third-party game developer, by the way, they didn't want to market the different versions as being different. They didn't want you to know that if you get the one version is better than the others. So basically you have to beat the whole game, and then you're just rewarded with like a big second quest with a totally different map and everything. So it's interesting. Like they had to think of it as an Easter egg. They couldn't say it's just twice as long. It's just like, congratulations, here's a bonus area for you to play with, but it's massive. So that's pretty neat. I mean,
Nice.
that would be, it'd be a great value if you happen to buy it and you found that stuff out. It'd be mind blowing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's Pitfall 2. Like I said, because it's such a big game, it's kind of a little bit sort of like a Metroidvania, except that you don't gain new powers that let you explore new areas, but just like the size of it. I can't play that kind of game without a map because I'll get lost. And I think people would just draw their own maps back in the day just to be able to navigate.
Yeah, I was looking at this. I only played the original Pitfall back in the day. I'd play a lot of that all the time on my Atari. But I never ended up playing the sequel. And it's very interesting looking at video of this. Now, I'm wondering, Paul, do you know, are there still sections in the game, like in the original, where you get to like swing across like a moat with the rope or jump on alligator heads and stuff like that?
That's a good question. They actually took out the rope swinging or vine swinging.
Oh, no. That was like the funnest part of the first game. Because you get the little sound effect. As you're swinging across.
Yeah, I mean, like, I guess to have swimming or one of the other new mechanics, they had to lose that particular mechanic. But
I did see there was some sections in the game where you actually get to float around in a balloon, which I thought was pretty cool as well. So.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. You're right. So really cool for back in the day. I mean, for an Atari 2600 game, it was just huge. And we're not talking late, like 1987 Atari 2600 games could have a lot more storage. But back in 1984, this was still pretty amazing.
Nice.
That's Pitfall.
All right. Well, we're going to fall into our last game here. Yangus, take us home. What's the last 1984 game you'd like to chat about?
Okay. I was making sure I wasn't muted.
Nope, you're good.
I had to come back. I was typing out something real fast for that. But yeah, so for my last one, well, we've been exploring all sorts of genres and games with this episode, so I think to end off, we need to do one last bit of exploring and go into the deep jungles of Sabre Wulf. Released by Rare for the ZX Spectrum and Commodore 64, along with some other platforms. Those are the two that stood out the most, though, when looking up some notes real fast. This was an early title that was from the company. This game has you control the expert explorer, the Sabre Man, as you brave the harsh jungles to find the missing pieces of the legendary treasure. Danger lurks around every corner, including the titular Sabre Wulf, who cannot be defeated no matter what. All you can do is flee and hope that you can escape through enough screens to survive. The game is a top-down, maze-like game where you try and collect the pieces of the legendary treasure. Collect all the pieces and reach the jungle's exit, and you can beat the game. Along the way, though, Saberman can also collect some other treasures for points or some colored flowers for different power-ups. For example, you get a red one, he'll start moving around a lot faster. Enemies will instantly die if they bump into him. There's one where it's a purple one that will inverse your controls, but even though it does do that, you also have some brief invincibility, so you don't have to worry too much about enemies like sneaking up and getting you. But thankfully, without the flowers power-ups, Saberman is able to defend himself with his trusty sword by facing enemies and pushing the attack button. Even does a little fancy little dance when you keep holding the button. He'll like keep swinging the sword around, almost like he looks like he's fencing almost as you move left and right. It's pretty funny actually. But this is actually the most recent game of the ones that we're talking about tonight that I've played. As I recently played this via the Rare Replay collection on the Xbox Series systems. It is a tough game. You die in one hit. You do have all the power-ups you can try and pick up, but, once you get one, you got to hope for a flower to grow back. There's enemies popping up all over the place. So very much one of those games where they kept throwing stuff at you, but it is fun to mess around with, and I enjoyed getting a chance to experience this game. This was a cool game to also play and see, what this character was finally from, because I was actually introduced to Saberman via his appearance in Banjo-Tooie on the Nintendo 64. As a kid, I didn't really, appreciate this as much, but now as an adult and revisiting the game, it's cool to see that there's dialogue mentioning, he was a great hero from the past. He disappeared after 1984, and that the Sabre Wulf apparently kept chasing this guy all until they reached the frozen wastes of Hellfire Peaks, which is the level that you find him in. There's no wolf in sight though, but it was cool as a kid seeing like, oh, this is another Rare character, I guess. And now looking back and knowing more of the history, and having the means to kind of look more into that, it's like, oh, you appreciate that a little bit more. So Not really a whole much else have to say about this one. I enjoyed messing with it. It's definitely one that when I look at it, it's like, oh yeah, this is definitely a Commodore 64 game with its basic color palette of how they handle stuff. But it was fun. It's fun to mess around with though, and like I said, it was fun to actually get to play the game that Sabre Man himself was from, even though I'm not very good at it. But it's the novelty of getting to experience that game that I enjoyed. So, yeah, that's my last one I wanted to throw in real quick and give a shout out to one of my favorite companies, Rare, and one of their game characters that has a very fun little cameo in Banjo-Tooie.
And where else do we see Sabre Wulf? Do you remember?
Well, there was going to be a Game Boy Advance, like kind of sequel game, but that got canceled, unfortunately.
Oh, there's a fighting game. Famous fighting game has Sabre Wulf.
This is true. I almost forgot about that. Yeah. So the Sabre Wulf that appears in Killer Instinct, which is also by Rare, was named after the Sabre Wulf from this particular series, which that was something I found out about too when going through the Rare Replay, like video archive stuff that they had, is they were like, oh yeah, we decided to, name our werewolf character that we had after, have a Rare legacy sort of character to it. So that was pretty cool.
Right on.
But yes.
Interesting. I was watching I was wondering why he was going so fast. As you were talking, the guy on the screen was red. I was like, oh, there we go. I got my explanation for what I was watching right then.
Those when you get that red one, like you move super fast.
Yeah, I was like, wait a minute, do I have my YouTube set to like 2 times speed? No, that's just him flying through screens.
Yeah, it's hilarious because you just go flying by everything. It's like you almost feel like you have to like. I just imagine him like grabbing a tree to like go swinging around a corner, so like his feet just constantly moving.
Alrighty, well, I think that's it for our roundup of 1984 games. Next time, probably in a couple weeks, we're gonna fast forward a decade and see what was going on in the mid-90s, see if we get a little bit better graphics, maybe a battery save in the game, something a little bit bigger.
That's right. Thank you to both Pendy and Paul for helping us reminisce with us tonight on games from 1984. Thanks for joining us, guys.
A pleasure as always.
Yeah, I'm glad I got to be a part of this. I enjoy researching old games and going back and checking them out. So this was a lot of fun for me too.
Yeah, you're always welcome at Sidequest. So, as for everybody out there listening, I'd like to remind you people often we don't crowdsource or dynamically insert ads that you don't give two shits about. We're all grown-ass adults here. We like to talk about our video games and other topics that we enjoy, and we really don't need a dime of your money to do so. If you would like to contribute to DQ Fandom, though, feel free to head over to the Dragon's Den and donate some money to Woodus, who's paid to keep those lights on for almost 3 decades now. You could use one of his affiliate links to buy Infinity Strash, Dragon Quest Monsters 3. You could pre-order Dragon Quest 3, the HD 2D coming up later this year, or literally anything else you buy through his affiliate link on Amazon. I think it was 2 years ago, we bought 3 Switches for work and a bunch of games for a club and did that all and made sure I clicked on Woodus's affiliate link first, and he got like 10 cents out of it. So, you can help him out with a penny or two. Also, shout out to our most graphic of graphic artists in residence here at the STEU, Dwayne. He's working on a new cover image for Sidequest, so we should have that soon too.
Ooh.
Yay!
Yes, and thanks for all our new All Trades DQ Media Abbey cover art that he was able to design for us as well.
Yeah, we love it.
Yeah, looking forward to what he gets done for Yangus and me. Thanks for offering again. And with that all said, bye everyone.
Sidequest complete. See you in 10 years.
Catch you later.